the widowed Apache woman he hired as a cleaner. He never knew she would become his wife. John had always been a quiet man. He lived in a small town in Arizona, surrounded by the endless desert and the soft hills in the distance. His life was simple and orderly. He worked as a manager at a local office, a job he had held for many years, and after long days of work, he came home to a house that was tidy but felt lonely. John had never been the kind of person to throw parties or invite neighbors over. His social circle was small, mostly limited to colleagues at work, and even with them he often felt like an outsider. There was a rhythm to his life: wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, read a book, and sleep. But in that rhythm he realized there was something missing. The house itself reflected his life. It was neat, with clean walls and polished floors, but it lacked warmth. There were no children running through the rooms, no laughter echoing down the hallways. John loved the simplicity of it, but sometimes, especially in the evenings, he would sit in his living room with a cup of tea and feel the silence pressing in around him. He had considered hiring someone to help keep the house clean, not because he was too lazy, but because he wanted to free up time and bring a bit of life into his home. One chilly morning in early spring, John placed an advertisement in the town's bulletin board and online. He was looking for a cleaner. He wasn't expecting much. After all, small towns often had limited options. Still, he hoped to find someone reliable who would take pride in their work. A few days later, there was a knock at the door. Standing there was a woman he had never seen before. She looked calm and composed, her face carrying a quiet strength that immediately drew his attention. She introduced herself as Mary. Mary was a widow, a mother, and an Apache woman who had lived all her life close to the land. She carried herself with dignity, despite the hardships she had endured. Her husband had passed away only a few years earlier, leaving her to raise 2 children on her own. The loss had been painful, and yet she carried herself with grace, never letting her struggles define her entirely. She had come to John's house that morning not just to seek work, but to find a way to support her family with honesty and effort. John felt a strange mix of curiosity and admiration. There was something in Mary's eyes that spoke of resilience. She smiled politely, and the warmth in that simple gesture made the small living room feel a little brighter. He invited her in and offered her a seat. As they sat down, John noticed the way Mary observed his home, not critically but thoughtfully. She asked questions about the chores, the frequency of cleaning, and the areas that needed special attention. Her approach was professional but gentle, and John felt an unexpected sense of comfort. The conversation moved slowly at first. John was not a man of many words, and Mary, though polite, was cautious. She had been through difficult times and knew that trust could not be given easily. They spoke about the work, the schedule, and the expectations. Mary assured him that she would take care of the home as if it were her own, and John felt a strange reassurance in her sincerity. It was not common to meet someone whose words carried such quiet confidence. After agreeing on the terms, John offered Mary the job. She accepted with a humble smile, and they shook hands, a gesture that felt heavier than usual, as if both of them sensed that this was more than a simple employment arrangement. That afternoon, Mary began her first day. She moved through the house with care, dusting, sweeping, and polishing. John watched from a distance, noticing the attention she gave to every detail. It was as if she treated the home with respect, almost like a sacred space, rather than just a workplace. As the days passed, John found himself looking forward to her presence. He didn't realize it at first. It was subtle. The sound of her humming quietly while cleaning, the gentle way she arranged the furniture, the small gestures that showed she cared. He noticed that the house felt warmer, more alive. Mary had brought a sense of rhythm to the home that had been missing. She didn't intrude on his life, nor did she try to change it. She simply added a layer of comfort and human presence that John had long forgotten he needed. Mary, on her part, was careful to keep professional boundaries. She had children to think about, responsibilities to manage, and a life outside of John's home. Yet she couldn't help but notice the kindness in him. John was not the type to speak much, but his actions often spoke louder than words. He would sometimes leave a cup of tea on the counter for her or offer a small snack when she worked long hours. These small gestures did not go unnoticed. Mary began to feel a quiet sense of ease in John's presence, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Their interactions were filled with subtle, unspoken understanding. John learned to trust Mary's judgment without needing to give constant instructions. Mary found herself appreciating the stability John provided, something that was rare in her unpredictable life as a widow raising children. It was a mutual respect, born not from words, but from shared space and shared effort. They discovered in each other a sense of calm, a respite from the challenges of life. Evenings became a time when the house seemed to hum with life. John would sit in his armchair reading, while Mary quietly tidied the living room. Sometimes he would glance at her and feel a warmth he couldn't quite explain. There was no rush, no pressure, only the gentle rhythm of two people coexisting peacefully. The walls of the house seemed to absorb the kindness and patience that flowed between them, creating a sense of home that neither had felt before. As spring turned to summer, John began to realize something that surprised him. He looked forward to Mary's visits not just because she cleaned, but because she brought life into the home. Her presence reminded him that life could be gentle and kind, even after years of solitude. Mary, too, found herself thinking of John in ways that went beyond mere employer and employee. There was a comfort in his presence, a quiet strength that reminded her of what it felt like to feel safe and valued. It was on one quiet morning, while the sunlight streamed through the windows and dust motes danced in the air, that John paused to truly notice Mary. She was arranging a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the edge of the desert, a small, thoughtful gesture. He watched her, appreciating the care she put into even the simplest things. In that moment, he realized that this meeting, this simple decision to hire a cleaner, had become something unexpectedly significant. Mary was no longer just someone who worked for him. She was becoming a part of the life he had quietly been longing for. The realization was subtle, gentle, and unassuming. There were no grand declarations, no sudden confessions. Just the quiet understanding that life had a way of bringing people together when they least expected it. John had opened his home to a stranger, and in doing so, had opened a door to something far greater: connection, warmth, and the promise of a shared future. Mary, in turn, had found a place where her presence mattered, where her efforts were appreciated, and where she could feel a sense of belonging once more. By the end of that first season, the small house in the Arizona desert had changed. It was no longer just a place of solitude. It had become a space where trust, respect, and quiet companionship could grow. John and Mary, two individuals from different walks of life, had begun a journey neither had anticipated. What started as a simple hiring had sown the seeds of friendship, understanding, and the slow, gentle beginnings of love. And so, the first part of their story closed with the promise of new beginnings. Two lives once separate and marked by loneliness were now quietly intertwined. Neither John nor Mary could foresee what lay ahead, but they both felt a subtle shift in their hearts, a shift that would change everything in ways neither had imagined. Days turned into weeks, and Mary's presence in John's home became a steady rhythm, almost like the gentle heartbeat of the house. Every morning she arrived promptly, carrying her cleaning supplies in a well-worn bag, greeting John with a soft "good morning," and immediately beginning her work. At first, John would observe her from a distance, fascinated by her careful, deliberate movements. She didn't rush, but neither did she linger unnecessarily. Every sweep of her broom, every polish of the wooden table seemed purposeful, almost meditative. Mary had her own rhythm, her own way of moving through the space. She would start in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, washing the dishes, and making sure everything smelled fresh. The scent of lemon cleaner mingled with the faint aroma of the desert air drifting in through the open windows. John would sometimes pause in his office, listening to the quiet swish of her broom or the gentle hum of her voice as she worked. It was a sound that slowly began to feel comforting, almost like music in the otherwise silent house. At first, their conversations were short and practical. "Do you want me to dust the shelves this week?" Mary would ask. "Yes, please," John would reply, or "The laundry is ready for folding," and John would nod. Simple exchanges like this began to form a small but significant connection. John was not naturally expressive. He didn't talk about his feelings or his life with strangers. But with Mary, he found that words came easier, even if just in small doses. Her calm presence created a safe space where he felt he could speak without fear of judgment. Mary, for her part, noticed the quiet loneliness in John's life. She had seen it in the way he carefully arranged his books, in the way he paused sometimes in the doorway as if weighing whether to say something, and in the small gestures of care he showed for his home. She recognized that he was a man of routine, someone who had perhaps lived too long without meaningful companionship. But she also saw the kindness beneath the surface, a genuine, unassuming kindness that made her feel respected. Their conversation slowly began to grow beyond chores and schedules. Mary would talk about her children, about the small victories and struggles of raising them alone. She spoke about her late husband sometimes, not in sadness, but in remembrance. She shared stories of her heritage, the Apache traditions she held dear, the values of respect, courage, and community. John listened with genuine interest, asking questions here and there, sometimes surprised at how much he enjoyed the stories. He had lived most of his life in quiet solitude, but hearing about Mary's life opened a window to a world he had not known. Mary, too, learned about John. He spoke little about himself, but gradually she discovered pieces of his past. His childhood in the same town, his love for books, his early struggles at work, and the quiet longing for family that he had never fulfilled. She sensed a deep well of empathy in him, a desire to care for others even if he had never fully allowed anyone to care for him. There was a subtle balance forming between them, a relationship built not on grand gestures, but on shared understanding, trust, and respect. One afternoon, as Mary was dusting the living room shelves, she noticed a small photo tucked behind a row of books. It was a picture of John as a young man, standing beside a group of friends on a hiking trip. She picked it up and smiled softly. "You were adventurous once," she said quietly. John chuckled, a sound that was rare but warm. "I suppose I was," he replied. "Life had other plans." Mary didn't ask for more. She simply returned the photo to its place, appreciating the quiet honesty in his words. Moments like these, small and unassuming, were laying the foundation for something deeper. As the weeks went by, their routines began to overlap with life outside the chores. John started leaving small notes for Mary on the counter, thank you notes for her work, or little reminders about things she might need. Mary, in turn, would sometimes bring small treats from home, little snacks for John to enjoy after his long days. These gestures were simple, almost trivial, but they spoke volumes about the growing bond between them. Trust and care were no longer just feelings. They were actions that gave life to the connection forming quietly between them. One evening, a sudden summer storm swept across the town. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and the sky was heavy with dark clouds. John had been working late and Mary was finishing up the cleaning. A loud crash of thunder startled them both. Mary went to the window to check if anything had been damaged, and John followed her. Together, they looked out at the rain, sharing a silent moment of awe at the power of nature. For the first time, John felt comfortable enough to speak from the heart. "I always thought storms made people nervous," he said softly, "but with someone here, it feels different." Mary smiled, understanding the unspoken meaning in his words. It was a quiet acknowledgement that they were no longer just two strangers in a house. They were companions in life's unpredictable moments. The storm passed, leaving the desert air cool and fresh. That night, as Mary finished her work and prepared to leave, John felt an unfamiliar reluctance to see her go. "Do you want to stay for a cup of tea?" he asked. It was a small invitation, nothing grand, but it carried weight. Mary accepted, and they sat together at the kitchen table, drinking tea and talking about their dreams and fears. For Mary, it was a rare opportunity to relax and share her thoughts without concern. For John, it was a moment of connection he hadn't realized he needed so deeply. Over time, John began to notice small changes in himself. He smiled more often, laughed quietly at Mary's subtle jokes, and felt a growing sense of hope. His home no longer felt like a place of solitude, but a place where life could unfold naturally. He looked forward to the mornings when Mary arrived, to the soft sound of her humming, to the conversations that now stretched beyond chores. Mary, too, found herself thinking of John outside the house, wondering how he was, hoping he had eaten well, or if he had handled the long day with ease. Their bond was growing quietly, steadily, without rush, built on everyday moments. One Saturday, Mary invited John to join her for a visit to the local market. It was an ordinary trip, but for both of them it was significant. Walking side by side through the stalls, exchanging smiles and small talk with vendors, they discovered that life could be lighter, more joyful when shared. John found himself laughing at Mary's playful comments, and Mary noticed the warmth in John's eyes as he listened intently to her stories. It was during moments like these, simple yet profound, that they realized their connection went beyond employer and employee. John began to trust Mary in ways he hadn't trusted anyone in years. He shared small personal details about his life, his struggles at work, and the loneliness he felt after years of living alone. Mary listened without judgment, offering quiet wisdom and empathy. Her presence became a source of comfort, a reminder that he was not alone in facing life's challenges. Mary, in turn, confided in John about her children, her fears, and her dreams for the future. Their relationship had evolved into one of mutual support and understanding. By the end of the summer, it was clear that their bond had deepened. The house had transformed from a place of quiet solitude into a home filled with warmth, laughter, and companionship. John no longer felt the pressing weight of loneliness, and Mary no longer felt the burden of carrying life's challenges entirely on her own. They had found in each other a quiet, enduring partnership built not on grand gestures, but on everyday acts of care, attention, and respect. Mary continued her work with dedication, but now the days carried a new meaning. She looked forward to sharing her life with John, even in small, ordinary moments. John, too, began to anticipate her visits, to value her presence not just for the work she did, but for the life and light she brought into his home. The bond they shared was subtle yet profound, a reminder that true connections often grow slowly, nurtured by patience, trust, and kindness. And so, part 2 of their story closed with a quiet promise, a promise that life, even in its simplest routines, could be filled with connection, understanding, and the beginnings of love. The relationship between John and Mary had grown beyond the practical, reaching into the emotional, forming a foundation that neither of them could have anticipated when they first met. It was a bond built in ordinary moments, proving that love often arrives quietly, patiently, and unexpectedly. Life has a way of testing people, often when they least expect it. For John and Mary, Their quiet rhythm of daily routines and gentle companionship was about to face challenges that would reveal the strength of their bond. It started in a small, almost unnoticeable way. Mary's youngest child, little Anna, came home from school one afternoon feeling unwell. Her forehead burned with a fever, and her usual energy was gone. Mary's heart tightened at the sight. As a mother, she had always handled such moments with care, but the illness seemed more serious this time. John noticed Mary's worry immediately. He was in his home office when Anna's whimpers echoed through the hallway. Without hesitation, he left his work and walked to the living room where Mary was gently comforting her daughter. "Do you need any help?" he asked quietly, unsure of what she might need but wanting to be of service. Mary shook her head at first, hesitant to ask for assistance, but she could see the genuine concern in John's eyes. With a grateful nod, she allowed him to step in. John fetched a wet cloth to cool Anna's forehead and prepared a warm cup of herbal tea for her. The next few days were a whirlwind. Anna's fever fluctuated, sometimes rising high enough to cause alarm. Mary had to divide her attention between caring for Anna and continuing her work in John's house. John noticed the strain and quietly offered to help with some of the household chores, so Mary could focus on her daughter. It was a gesture that surprised Mary. She had hired John as her employer, not as a partner in her personal struggles. Yet in that moment, she realized that he was far more than an employer. He was someone she could trust. Meanwhile, John faced his own challenge. A sudden complication at work required him to stay late at the office for several consecutive nights. Projects that had seemed routine now demanded extra hours and attention. He was tired, stressed, and frustrated at the growing pressure, but he did not let it show to Mary. Instead, he quietly continued helping where he could, fetching groceries for her, picking up medicines for Anna, and checking in with a gentle call to see if she needed anything. Their small acts of kindness toward each other became lifelines, subtle but powerful. During this period, Mary's older son, David, struggled with homework and the pressures of school. Mary wanted to be there for him, but the illness of his sister and the demands of her cleaning job made it difficult. John noticed her quiet stress. One afternoon, as Mary sat helping David with his mathematics homework, John offered to sit with them and assist. He wasn't naturally inclined toward teaching, but he had patience, and David responded well to his calm guidance. That evening, they managed to finish the homework together, and Mary felt a sense of relief she hadn't experienced in weeks. Through these shared challenges, John and Mary discovered a deeper side of their relationship. They learned how to support each other not only in ordinary routines, but in moments of difficulty. Their interactions were no longer limited to polite conversation or light-hearted stories. Now they shared concerns, worries, and fears, finding in each other a quiet source of strength. Mary began to see John as someone dependable, someone who could stand beside her when life became heavy. John, in turn, admired Mary's resilience, her unwavering dedication to her children, and the calm courage she displayed in the face of adversity. One evening, after Anna had finally fallen asleep, John and Mary sat together on the back porch. The desert air was cool, and the sky was painted with the pinks and oranges of sunset. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Mary looked at John and said softly, "I don't know what I would do without your help these past few days." John shook his head. "We're helping each other, that's what matters." It was a simple statement, but it carried profound meaning. In that moment, they realized that life's challenges could bring people together in ways that joy alone could not. The next few weeks continued to test them. Anna recovered slowly, and David faced new challenges at school. John's work demands remained high, and Mary still had her cleaning responsibilities. Yet through it all, their bond strengthened. They developed an unspoken communication, anticipating each other's needs, sharing small gestures of care that made life a little easier. John learned to notice when Mary was stressed before she said a word. Mary learned to recognize the moments when John needed encouragement or a quiet word of comfort. It was a partnership built on empathy, trust, and shared responsibility. One afternoon, a minor accident occurred. David tripped while playing outside, scraping his knee badly. Mary panicked, but John quickly guided her calmly, cleaned the wound, and applied a bandage. He remained calm even as Mary fretted, offering gentle reassurance. The incident was a small one, but it revealed how naturally they had come to rely on each other. Mary saw in John a steady presence she could count on, while John felt a protective instinct toward her and her children. Each challenge, no matter how minor, revealed the depth of care growing quietly between them. Amid these trials, they found small moments of joy. On weekends, when the chores were done and the children were safe, they would walk together in the nearby desert, talking quietly about their lives and dreams. They discovered shared interests, the love of nature, the appreciation of quiet mornings, and the comfort of simple meals shared together. Mary taught John about some of the Apache traditions she held dear, telling stories of her ancestors and the lessons of resilience, courage, and respect they had passed down. John listened, fascinated, and found himself deeply appreciating the wisdom in her words. These walks became a ritual of healing and connection. They laughed together at the small things, a rabbit darting across their path, a lizard climbing a rock, the way the wind shifted through the desert grasses. They discovered that challenges did not have to overshadow life's beauty. Together, they found ways to turn difficulty into understanding, worry into shared responsibility, and stress into a lesson in patience and empathy. As the season progressed, John and Mary realized that their bond had grown far beyond what they had expected. The challenges they had faced together had created a foundation of trust and mutual respect. John had seen Mary at her most vulnerable, caring for her children, balancing work, and handling unexpected problems. Mary had seen John not only as a kind employer but as a compassionate, dependable human being. Their connection was no longer limited to daily routines. It had evolved into a deep understanding of one another's strengths, weaknesses, and the quiet courage that kept them moving forward. One rainy evening, as the desert was drenched in a sudden downpour, Mary shared a personal story she had never told anyone before. She spoke about the first night she had spent alone after her husband passed, the fear she had felt for herself and her children, and the determination that had carried her through. John listened without interruption, offering comfort with a simple touch on her shoulder, a gesture that spoke louder than words. That night, Mary realized that John was not just a friend or companion. He was someone she could trust with her deepest fears and hopes. Through all these shared challenges, John and Mary began to see the potential for something more than friendship. They didn't rush or force feelings. Their connection grew naturally, shaped by empathy, support, and quiet affection. The love that blossomed was steady, patient, and rooted in the daily acts of care they offered each other. It was the kind of love that could endure challenges, built not on excitement alone but on the foundation of shared experience, mutual respect, and unwavering support. By the end of this period, both John and Mary had changed. John had learned the value of opening his life to someone else, of trusting and depending on another person. Mary had found someone who respected her independence while offering support and stability. Together, they had navigated difficult times, emerging stronger and more connected than ever before. The trials they faced had not weakened their bond. They had strengthened it, creating a partnership that would sustain them through life's future uncertainties. And so, Part 3 closed with the quiet realization that love was not just about romantic gestures or fleeting passion. It was about showing up for one another, sharing burdens, offering support, and finding joy in small moments amidst life's challenges. John and Mary had discovered the strength of their connection through shared trials, and the foundation they had built would guide them toward a future filled with trust, companionship, and the quiet promise of enduring love. With the challenges behind them, life slowly settled into a steady rhythm for John and Mary. The summer heat faded into the soft warmth of early autumn, and the desert around the town took on shades of gold and amber. The house, once quiet and lonely, now felt alive with small sounds. Laughter from Mary's children, the gentle hum of Mary tidying up, and John's occasional chuckle at a story or joke. It was in these ordinary, unremarkable moments that their bond began to shift, almost imperceptibly, from friendship to something deeper. John had always been careful with his emotions. He was a man who observed life quietly, often content to stay in the background. But now, he found himself noticing Mary in ways he had not before. It wasn't about her appearance, though he found her dignified and warm. It was about the way she moved, the way she spoke to her children with patience, the kindness she showed in every gesture. He admired her resilience, her quiet strength, and the way she never sought attention but still commanded respect. These feelings surprised him. He had never thought that someone like Mary could enter his life and change it so subtly, so completely. Mary, too, noticed changes in herself. She had always been cautious about trusting others, especially after losing her husband. Her heart had been guarded, shaped by years of responsibility and grief. Yet she found herself looking forward to John's presence each day, not just because of the help he offered with the house, but because of the calm assurance he brought into her life. She found comfort in his quiet conversations, in the way he remembered details about her children, and in the small, thoughtful gestures that showed he cared. Slowly, she began to realize that she valued him more than she had expected. Their connection deepened through the simplest of routines. On mornings when the sun rose over the desert and the air was crisp with coolness, they would share coffee together before Mary began her chores. They talked about anything and everything, memories from childhood, funny moments from the past week, dreams for the future. These conversations were light, yet meaningful. They discovered shared values: honesty, patience, respect for family, and a love for the quiet beauty of nature. With every passing day, their understanding of each other grew, as did the warmth between them. It was not a sudden realization. There were no dramatic confessions or gestures. Instead, it was a series of small, accumulating moments. John noticed how much he missed Mary's presence when she wasn't there, how her laughter could brighten even the dullest of days. Mary noticed the protective instinct John displayed, the way he anticipated the children's needs, and the subtle ways he tried to ease her burdens. Their hearts were quietly learning the language of love without needing to name it. One afternoon, as autumn leaves swirled gently across the yard, John invited Mary to help him organize some old family albums. They sat together on the living room floor, flipping through photographs of John's childhood, his family gatherings, and the places he had visited. Mary shared stories about her own life as they compared experiences, laughed at funny moments, and marveled at how life had unfolded differently for each of them. The hours passed quickly, and by the end, both felt a sense of closeness that went beyond mere friendship. They had shared not just space, but a part of their personal histories, creating a bond that was intimate, respectful, and enduring. During this time, they also began to share small joys in the home. John started leaving little notes for Mary, thank you messages, reminders to rest, or just a simple, I hope your day is going well. Mary, in turn, began preparing small treats for John, like a batch of cookies or a warm pie after a long day. These gestures were small, but they carried a depth of meaning. They were no longer simply employer and employee. They were companions who understood the value of thoughtfulness and care. As autumn deepened, the town held its annual harvest festival. Mary decided to bring her children, and John, after some initial hesitation, agreed to join them. It was a simple outing, but it became a turning point in their relationship. Watching Mary interact with her children, seeing the pride and love in her eyes, John realized how much he admired her strength and dedication. Mary, in turn, saw John not just as a quiet, dependable man, but as someone capable of joy, patience, and genuine kindness. In that moment, surrounded by the laughter of children and the warmth of community, both felt the stirrings of something profound: love. Evening walks became a cherished ritual. After Mary's work was done, they would stroll through the desert paths, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. The conversations were gentle, often reflective. Mary would speak about her hopes for her children, her dreams for stability and happiness, and John would share thoughts about life he had never voiced before. Walking side by side, sharing these quiet moments, they began to recognize the subtle shift in their feelings. There was comfort in the silence, intimacy in the shared space, and a growing realization that they were no longer just friends. One particular evening, as the sky glowed with the soft light of dusk, John paused on the path and looked at Mary. The wind ruffled her hair, and she smiled at him, unaware of the thoughts running through his mind. He realized that he wanted her not just as a companion or a friend, but as a partner in life. He admired her courage, her strength, and the way she made his home feel alive. It was a quiet, powerful realization, one that both excited and scared him. He was unsure of how Mary would respond, yet he could not ignore the feelings growing in his heart. Mary, too, began to sense the change. She noticed the way her heart felt lighter in John's presence, the anticipation she felt for their conversations, and the subtle worry when he was not around. She realized that her feelings had shifted from appreciation and friendship to something deeper. She felt a quiet happiness when John laughed at her jokes, a warmth when he offered support, and a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. It was not sudden or dramatic, but steady, growing with every shared moment, every small act of kindness. The turning point came one chilly evening when they were both sitting by the fireplace. The children had gone to bed, and the house was quiet. John looked at Mary and said softly, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel different. Being with you, it makes everything feel right." Mary's eyes met his, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that she felt the same way, that this bond between them had grown into love. It was a love built slowly, patiently, and with understanding, rooted in shared respect, trust, and the small moments of everyday life. From that evening on, their relationship became more open, yet it retained its gentle, respectful nature. They discovered the joys of partnership, cooking meals together, planning outings, sharing responsibilities, and supporting each other's dreams. John found himself included in Mary's family life in ways that felt natural, while Mary felt a sense of stability and care she had not experienced since her husband passed. Love was no longer a quiet possibility. It had become a living, breathing presence in their home. As autumn gave way to winter, John and Mary continued to nurture their relationship. They celebrated small victories, comforted each other in moments of stress, and found joy in ordinary routines. Every day reinforced the understanding that they were not just lovers, but partners in life. Their connection had grown naturally, without pressure, and it carried a quiet strength that promised endurance through whatever challenges lay ahead. By the end of this season, both John and Mary had come to a profound understanding. Love was not always about grand declarations or dramatic moments. Sometimes it was about showing up for each other, sharing life's simple joys, supporting one another through challenges, and finding comfort in quiet companionship. Their love was gentle, patient, and enduring, a reflection of the respect, trust, and care they had cultivated over months of shared life. And so, Part 4 closed with the realization that love had blossomed quietly, nurtured by patience, understanding, and everyday moments. John and Mary had discovered that the strongest bonds are not always sudden or intense, but slow-growing, steady, and resilient. Theirs was a love that could withstand challenges, celebrate joys, and create a home filled with warmth, laughter, and shared dreams. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and the foundation they had built promised a future filled with hope, companionship, and enduring love. Winter had settled gently over the desert, coating the mornings in frost and painting the distant mountains with soft white hues. The small town around John's home felt quiet and peaceful, but inside the house, life was warm and lively. John and Mary had moved into a rhythm that blended friendship, love, and family seamlessly. Their bond, nurtured slowly over months of shared life, had grown strong enough to withstand life's challenges and gentle enough to embrace joy in ordinary moments. The love that had blossomed between them was no longer quiet or uncertain. It was a living, breathing part of their daily lives. The decision to marry had not come suddenly. Both John and Mary had thought carefully about what it meant. Mary, a widow who had learned to rely on herself, understood the responsibilities that came with committing to someone new. John, who had lived quietly for many years, recognized the depth of his feelings and the joy that Mary had brought into his life. Together, they decided that their love deserved a formal celebration, a moment to honor what had grown between them, and to show Mary's children that a new chapter of their lives was beginning. Preparation for the wedding was simple but heartfelt. They didn't want a large or extravagant event. Instead, they focused on intimacy, closeness, and family. Invitations went out only to close friends, neighbors, and those who had witnessed the growth of their bond over the months. Mary involved her children in the planning, letting them help choose small decorations, flowers, and colors for the event. John worked quietly in the background, ensuring that everything was organized, paying attention to little details that he knew would make Mary happy. The morning of the wedding was calm. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of desert sage. Mary dressed carefully, her children assisting with her simple yet elegant attire. John, in his suit, waited at the small outdoor area where they had chosen to exchange vows. The space overlooked the soft hills and the fading winter sun, a natural backdrop that felt both timeless and personal. The children stood nearby, their faces filled with curiosity and excitement, sensing the importance of the moment. As Mary approached, John felt a wave of emotion that he had not expected. She moved with grace, her face radiant with quiet joy. The children walked beside her, holding her hands gently, and for a moment, John realized how much his life had changed since the day Mary first came into his home as a cleaner. He remembered the quiet mornings, the small acts of care, the shared laughter, and the challenges they had faced together. Every memory led to this moment, a simple, beautiful acknowledgement of love, trust, and partnership. The ceremony itself was intimate. Words were exchanged not in grand speeches, but in heartfelt promises. John promised to support Mary and her children, to stand by her through life's challenges, and to honor the love that had grown between them. Mary promised the same, acknowledging the partnership, respect, and affection that had formed in the quiet moments of daily life. They held hands, looked into each other's eyes, and felt a deep sense of completeness. It was a wedding not of extravagance but of sincerity, a celebration of the lives they had intertwined. After the ceremony, the family celebrated in the cozy warmth of John's home. Simple decorations, homemade treats, and laughter filled the space. Mary's children hugged John, their faces beaming, happy to see their mother so joyful and at peace. Friends and neighbors shared stories, offered blessings, and joined in the quiet festivity. John and Mary moved through the room, exchanging smiles, handshakes, and quiet words of gratitude. Every gesture reflected the deep connections they had nurtured over time. Life after the wedding felt natural, as if the home had been waiting for this moment. Mary and John continued their routines, but now with an added sense of partnership and belonging. John took joy in being included fully in Mary's family life. He helped with homework, shared meals, and joined in evening walks. Mary, in turn, cherished the support, warmth, and companionship John provided. Their love was evident not in grand displays, but in the small, everyday actions. The way John brewed Mary's favorite tea just right, the way Mary remembered to leave a small note on his desk, or how they shared quiet moments watching the desert sun set. The children thrived in this new environment. They felt secure and happy, knowing that their mother was loved and supported. John became a steady presence in their lives, not replacing their father who had passed, but offering a new source of care, guidance, and friendship. Mary watched with quiet relief and gratitude as her children adjusted, laughed, and grew closer to John. She realized that this family they were building together was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary of trust, warmth, and mutual respect. As winter slowly gave way to spring, John and Mary found themselves dreaming together. They talked about future travels, projects around the house, and ways to create a home that was not only comfortable but full of memories. They planted a small garden in the backyard, teaching the children how to tend to the plants, water the flowers, and watch life grow. It was a simple activity, but it symbolized growth, patience, and the nurturing of life together, a reflection of their own journey. Challenges still came, as life always does. Unexpected expenses, school difficulties, and the occasional illness reminded them that life was never entirely without struggle. Yet, John and Mary faced these challenges side by side. They had learned the importance of patience, support, and quiet resilience. Each challenge became an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to show love through action, and to reinforce the partnership that had grown from the simplest beginnings. Community life also became richer. John, who had been quiet and somewhat isolated, found himself welcomed by neighbors who had come to know Mary and her children. Mary, once cautious about trusting others, found joy in sharing moments with friends and family, hosting small gatherings and participating in local events. Together, they became a team not only within their household but in the broader community, embodying a sense of unity, care, and generosity. Evenings in their home became moments of reflection and contentment. After the children went to bed, John and Mary would sit together in the living room, sipping tea or watching the soft glow of the fireplace. They would talk about the day, laugh at small mishaps, or simply sit in comfortable silence. These quiet moments, ordinary in appearance, were the essence of their love. It was steady, enduring, and grounded in reality. They realized that happiness often came not from excitement or drama, but from the simple act of being together, supporting one another, and appreciating life's small pleasures. As the years passed, their relationship continued to deepen. They celebrated birthdays, school milestones, and community events together. Mary's children grew up feeling loved and supported, and John found himself embracing the joys of parenthood in ways he had never anticipated. Their home became a place of warmth, laughter, and shared memories, a testament to the life they had built together from the moment Mary first walked into John's house. Looking back, both John and Mary marveled at how far they had come. What had started as a simple hiring of a cleaner had transformed into a profound partnership. They had discovered love in its truest form, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady, patient, and resilient. Their journey had been filled with challenges, small victories, laughter, and tears. Through it all, they had learned the value of trust, respect, and quiet companionship. The story of John and Mary became one that others in the community admired. It was not a tale of instant romance, but of lives intersecting in meaningful ways, of challenges faced together, and of love nurtured through patience and care. People often asked how they had built such a strong relationship, and both would smile quietly, knowing that the answer was simple. They showed up for each other every day, supported each other through life struggles, and celebrated every small joy together. In the end, John and Mary's life together was a testament to the power of patience, kindness, and genuine connection. They had turned a quiet house into a loving home, a simple companionship into a lifelong partnership, and an ordinary existence into a story of resilience, love, and joy. Their journey reminded them, and those around them, that love often comes quietly, in ordinary moments, and grows steadily when nurtured with care, respect, and unwavering support. And so, the story closed with warmth and hope. John and Mary, once strangers, now partners and soulmates, had created a life full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Their journey proved that true love is not about speed or drama, but about showing up, caring deeply, and building a home where hearts feel safe, cherished, and free to grow. From the day Mary first stepped into John's home as a cleaner to the day they celebrated their marriage and beyond, their lives had intertwined in a story that was ordinary in action but extraordinary in heart, an enduring testament to the quiet, powerful beauty of love.